Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX. I am Rishabh Gulati and this is episode 2 of our special 4-part series tracing across the world and Southeast Asia, specifically in this episode, the footprints of Ram Rajya and Indic civilization. We are trying to showcase to a larger audience here in India the actual extent of reality of various cultures claiming similar roots. This reality tells us of the imprint of an Indic civilization that we here in India don't claim to ourselves, but we share with countries like Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia. These cultural roots go back thousands of years, in some cases to the time of Ashoka. You can find the Ramayana is part of these civilizations, so in fact endemic to the civilizations that it is not considered at all as having emanated particularly from India, but also being rooted in their own cultural histories. From the roots in Sanskrit that we can find all over Thailand, to the kingdom of Ayutthaya, to the grand temples in Angkor Wat, of Buddhist leanings which also originates from the subcontinent of India, all the way until Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines, where the Ramayana is performed. It's a journey that should be enlightening to all of us. We have a special panel joining us on the telecast from all across this region. Let's begin by doing introductions. We have with us Mā Archanā. She is the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Anand Ashram in Indonesia. Professor Chua Su Pong. He is a Ramayana performer and also a Chinese opera expert. He's joining us from Singapore. Putri Minangsari, she is a dancer, poet and Ramlila performer from Indonesia. Dr. Gauri Krishnan, she is a Ramayana curator and art historian based out of Singapore. Dr. Sonia Jasrotia, she is a Sanskrit chair at the ICCR Buddhist and Sanskrit in Cambodia. Indiresh Kumar ji, many of you will recognize him. He's a national executive member of the RSS. Sushil Kumar Saraf, he is president of the VHP based out of Thailand. Sitting with him is Shri Vidyadhar Shukla. He is a senior Hindu priest who is also based out of Thailand. Ma'am, thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. Can you help us understand, ma'am, in Indonesia, when we talk about the Ramayana and Indic civilization, what are the roots? How old do they go, ma'am?
How old do they go? Before, I would like to say namaskar first to all of you, and I'm so happy again to see Shri Indiresh Ji Kumarji. So if we talk about Ramayana, it has started from a very, very long time ago. Because if we look at the history, we are looking at history now in a very different way because of the social geopolitics, like with different countries. But if we look at the civilization, it's all stretched. It's from the Saraswati, Sunda, Sindhu Saraswati civilization, from Afghanistan until the outer limits of Australia. So we did not import anything. So when the stories, if we remember the story in Ramayana, the name Yavadvipa was mentioned in Ramayana, right? Where Sugriva was dispatched. He dispatched his army to send them to Yavadvipa in search of Sita. So if we look at that, that means, you know, when the armies of Sugriva goes to other parts of Bharat that time, they were always hearing the stories of Rama. And so that is how we believe that in the so-called Indonesia right now is about Ramayana already. But the stories, it goes maybe from, if we look at the dances that we have right now about the Ramayana, maybe in the 8th century, something like that.
So about
but however,
years.
Prior to that, the stories, the philosophies, all Indonesian philosophies are all based on Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Can you help us understand, because I'm showing visuals on our screens of the various functions and the dances and the ceremonies that you do and the meditation. I can see I think a Hanuman Murti over there. We are showing this of what's happening at the Anand Ashram. Can you help us understand, when you're saying these traditions, you know, are rooted in the Ramayana, Mahabharata, what kind are they?
So we have the symbolics of who Ram is, who Lakshman is, who Hanuman is, and who Sita is. So if we look at the story of it, when Hanuman was finding Sita again, and Sita cannot be united with Ram without Hanuman. Hanuman is a symbol of devotion, and that is what we understand here. Of course, that is also I got this understanding from my gurus, Maharishi Anand Krishna. And Ram is the depiction of God itself, and Sita is the human, yeah. And then human is always gets separated by from God. It's through the ego, and Ravana here is the symbol of the world, the worldly life, and then also from the golden deer also.
Okay.
And what the difference of the story between the Valmiki and the Javanese of dance of Ramayana, the ending is usually Ram and Sita comes together. But the other ending of the story is like when Sita had to go to Agni Pariksha. There's a slight difference. And in the dances of the Java, we have this so-called Punakawan. Punakawan is the clown, deities. Okay. So it is in the stories of the Javanese, and the other half of the story, the end half of the story is a bit different than from the Valmiki.
Okay, so but, yeah, ma'am, yes? I wanted to ask you now, in a larger culture of being in an Islamic country, how are these cultural references to the Ramayana imbibed into day-to-day life in Java?
Oh, it's an everyday thing. It's a Sanatan Dharma values are in every culture, every household. Suppose if we want to have a harvesting, right? And it is done to pray through God, Lakshmi, but that she's called Devi Sri. And then also there's also stories. They always have dances or stories or puppet shows of Ramayana, and it's always imbibed there in the everyday life. It is never separated, even though we are in Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the whole world. And in everyday life,
so
such as...
I'm sure you're aware, ma'am, that in this country, in India, we have a lot of conversations regarding Ram and Ram Rajya and, Sanatan Dharma and the Ramayana. It's seen from a very religious light. We still have, unresolved issues in this country. So when you see it from an outside perspective, when people have disputes over the reconstruction of the Ram Mandir, etc., etc., what strikes you? Does it strike you as unusual that in a Muslim country you don't see these problems, but in India you do?
Well, we're starting to see those things again. It's happened throughout histories. But the thing is, when we start to say Hinduism, then it becomes a problem. Yeah, and then the thing in Indonesia, when people start to think that Hindu is Hindu or as a part of their everyday life, then it is easier for them, for all of us to embrace it. Yeah.
So do you believe in the concept of it being the way of life rather than religion?
Yes, it is a way of life. It is a philosophical life. It is the tradition and the cultural itself.
Okay.
It's the root.
Well, I'm hoping, ma'am, that once the pandemic is over, we get a chance for all of you guys to come down to this new complex that is being built in Ayodhya, and maybe we can have a physical conference like this rather than a virtual one. I look forward to you, Ma Archana. When you understand the concept of governance and good versus evil through the Ramayana, is it a religious concept alone, or is it above religion?
It's above religion. It's universal values. This is what humanity is all about. So it is not caged in some little box, So those values is applicable to everyone, and it should be like that.
Okay, Professor Chua.